내일은 말라 언젠가는 날아올라 해보고 싶은 게 너무나 많아 아까 말했어 어느새 잊었어 가장 중요했던 건 행복인데 보일 듯 보이지 않았던 미래에 내 잎을 넘어와 입 맞추고 싶다고 말해도 쉽게 오지 않아 소중한 나를 놓치고 있어 빈둥그레진 것 바빠서도 그랬나 봐 무슨 일이 있어도 나를 믿어준 내게 너무 감사해 아홉 개의 꽃잎처럼 이제는 약속해 소중히 간직해 행운이 아닌 행복을 바랄게 우리가 걸어갈 불안한 미래에 한 발짝 다가가 입 맞추고 싶다고 말해도 거기 있어줄래 소중한 나를 함께 해줄래 자꾸 끄적이지 않았던 미래에 새잎 클로버처럼 안아주고 싶어 잊지마 가장 소중한 건 손을 뻗으면 닿을 수 있어
Good evening and welcome back to Shenzhen I, where I think I was doing something that involved, I was going to say deadly neurotoxins, but that's not quite correct. That involved a device for interfacing to a neural interface. No, hang on, that's not right either. For connecting to a neural interface. In that we have this thing that doesn't, that attempts to count pulses that it receives on 6 different sensors and bundle them together in a fairly complicated way. And goodness, that's a complete disaster, isn't it? So, and it's been over a week because everything ran fairly late on Friday and I didn't thus do anything on Friday. Did I do anything on Sunday? I can't remember. Anyway, so I now have to work out what I'm doing, and I had a kind of idea, like while lying awake last night when I should really have been sleeping, relating to how I could make this work better, maybe. But the current layout here looks kind of unfamiliar, which makes me think I've forgotten everything I did in the last session. So we've got this thing is now sending extra numbers simply to act as a convenient number generator for this thing. But basically all this is doing is filling in what we've seen at each time step, yes. And what I was kind of thinking. What I was kind of thinking was that maybe we want one processor whose job is remembering if we saw precisely one thing last time unit, and if we did, what it was, and then another processor that handles what we saw this time unit and maybe merging it with what we saw last time unit.
Sounds terrifying because each of those sounds like a big. It seems like you've sawn the problem up into 3 things, each the size of the original problem.
Well, so the awkwardness here is that we have to that that we have to somehow either, given a bunch of inputs, we either remember one of them for the next time unit, or we emit all of them now, possibly combining them with one from the last time unit. And I think and I think at the moment we've got like the wrong abstractions for some of this or something. I don't know. So this one is just getting the RAM to contain what we want. It then signals to this one, which then reads through the RAM and attempts to count up how many it's seen. And I feel that counting how many can be done all the way up here if necessary. Though we do have the slight problem, this one has no instructions left now. We can make it bigger if we have to. And then we have this entertaining problem of merge sorting all of this lot into one list. So that even manages to send the wrong thing on the first cycle, which is impressive. So that one now, when it finds something real, sends it down here. And then that one now, having seen two numbers, knows that this is a time unit in which it needs to transmit things. And then for some reason that sends a 6. Yeah, this just... I think I've got it all very badly wrong. No, do not restart the other laptop to use my new software. Just thought I should update it while it was turned on. So I am very inclined here to burn the whole lot to the ground and try to do it more sensibly, but I probably need a vaguely clear idea about how I'm going to do that. So So yeah, that does, I'm
Find out we get improved.
so one interestingness.
And I'm not continuous, so. Or rather, stoting is discrete, not continuous, so.
That's great. Not at all.
Sorry, distraction. Right. So we have this thing which just handles multiplexing everything over one X bus line, to this thing which generates us something fairly unhelpful in the RAM. I feel like it would be better if what it wrote into the RAM was the actual signal numbers in increasing order, so that, like, we know, like, we can then reasonably easily merge them with other potential lists of signals. But on the other hand, that's what this gets anyway, albeit like 2 steps later. Only it doesn't appear to, because it appears to get the wrong numbers. Maybe we should debug that. What's it doing at all? I don't understand. So it looks at the first thing it finds. It, assuming it turns out to be non-zero, sends the new address, which is obviously one more than the address at from which we just read. And then stashes that. Finds we haven't reached the end, does the next one. Sends 2. Having stashed 1 as the last thing we saw, and then sends 6. So I think this one is doing at least a reasonable specification, even if it's not the specification. Like, it may not be doing precisely what I originally intended, but it's certainly doing something perfectly reasonable. So what's the next processor in the chain doing? It receives that has a bunch of what look like flags indicating that it's right. Yes. So that, I think, is trying to work out whether it can construct it has enough signals for a packet. Decides it doesn't because it only has one signal so far. Then it receives the next signal, and then it transmits the first thing and the second thing, and it notably transmits one more than the correct number each time. Because this does. So now, so let's just continue. So right, okay, so the problem actually is that it only transmits the first 2 bytes of the packet. Yeah. I think partly because I don't have the design well enough embedded in my head, I may want to just trash some of the, at least the trailing parts of this. because they don't work and I don't understand what they're meant to be doing in the first place.
Then how do you know they don't work?
Because they fail their tests. Expected
I don't know what
output,
my students are doing, so I can tell they don't work.
expected 015, actual 012. Right, if we turn off the breakpoint, like, it's transmitting a huge load of utter rubbish. I suppose I could go back and look at the previous session on YouTube and work out what I was doing. But no, I think this would benefit from being rethought a bit. So we could have a processor that knows how to count bits, and without throwing anything away. No, okay, maybe let's move there. So that will still do just as many bad things as it did before. But the point is, I've left enough space that I could add another processor now to do some experimental coding in. So, like, if we received... What was my kind of thought that I had last night? Well, one of the things I thought was that you can add the numbers we get. If we want to just count how many bits are currently active for working out whether this should be, whether we should send a packet now or think about sending a packet later or whatever, then we can just add together the 2 bytes we get from these two, and we get a number whose digits are 0, 1 or 2, and then we can add the 3 digits together, and that gives us the total number of active signals. So it will be something like
If the digits are all more than 1, then multiplying by 111 will pile them all together in the top digit position.
except that we have saturating arithmetic. Otherwise, it's a lovely trick. But someone has built these for DSP. So I fear that we do have to do it a little bit more cautiously than that. We have got digits set though. So we can do something like set digit 2 to 0, multiply by 10, add dat, mov ac dat. What the hell have I left myself with now? So that then means that the high order digit now contains the sum of the 2 high order digits of the original, and the low order digit is untouched. So I can now that's probably unnecessarily complicated, but I think that gets me in ACK the number of set bits. Maybe. I think they are 0, 1, 2 from low order to high order.
I'm not quite sure how you seem to have only got digit 0 left, and that's the under all
Oh, you're right. No, you're wrong, but you're also right. Excuse me.
That clears out the top 2 digits, and then add something to it and get back the second digit of the result, which is always just going to be the second digit of what you added. However, not just the top digit of that, unless there's a carry.
Yeah, I got something wrong because the answer came out at 2, which is like better than coming out as 1, but not as good as coming out at 3. Am I missing? Oh, I'm missing. I'm an idiot. Yes. That's the instruction I'm missing.
Right, now I see, yes. Now some of the flaws of it.
So yes, that with more code than I was expecting, but correctly counts the set bits in the 2 words. So that's kind of annoying because that we haven't got any much by way of spare instructions in this processor to do anything else.
If only you had a maths code processor, you could reduce mod 11.
Sadly, you aren't allowed the math code processor except for prototyping work because they're not selling it in quantity yet.
Also, you could reduce mod 9.
So given that, what could we do with it? Probably not too hard then for an MC6000 to have like a sliding window of how many signals have been seen in the last 2 time units. But then we still need to sort out which ones. And like our techniques for doing that are... Is there some ugly thing I can do with lookup tables to make this faster? Not really. I mean, if we could get out binary rather than decimal, then each one could be a lookup in a lookup table. But that wouldn't be very helpful. So I think that trick's not going to work. Because now my problem is we can, on this, build fairly simply something that can say this cycle we should be emitting the things we saw, nothing, or the things we saw this cycle, or the things we saw this cycle union the thing we saw last cycle, which are essentially the 3 things you can have to do in a time unit. But then we do need to translate the 2 things we get from the I/O expanders into the array format that we're then going to send over the network. And we've got a setup that can kind of do that.
It's probably not helpful, but the two instructions that set digit 2 and 1 and act to 0 could be replaced with digit get 0.
Yep. It's slightly helpful. Maybe if this one ends up being used, then that gives us 2 spare instructions, which is getting up to a number you can do something with. In particular, we're going to need 1 instruction just to send the result somewhere. So it wouldn't take very much.
Also, hold on. Digit get 2, add it to that. Digit get 1, add it to that.
I mean,
Digit get and then get it back and digit get 0. I think by moving things up into the top to accumulate them, you're making more work.
so the problem. Oh yes, yes, I think you're right.
I think that's considerably shorter. And then you've got the time.
Yeah, I think I may have been I think I blame your attempt at piling everything up in the high order digit.
this does-
I can't quite remember whether that was actually my plan before. Like my plan was definitely you shuffle things around so as to pile everything up somewhere. Maybe I didn't actually originally intend it to be the high order digit.
But you're right, of course, and this is how you would fix my approach to make it work on saturated arithmetic. And the answer is don't try that in the world. Sorry.
Yes, I think that may have been what I had in my mind at 5 o'clock this morning or whenever it was.
Oh, in that case, it's not my fault. It's just now.
No, it's. I mean, yes, I had an idea and I forgot about half of it, and you came up with a suggestion for half of it that didn't work, and then I built for the half I couldn't remember that didn't work, and then I built a new thing on top of the half I couldn't remember, a new version of the half I couldn't remember that works. But so yes, instead we can go. So that then that means that now AC has the sum of those of the bottom 2 digits in its lowest digit, and DAT still has the original. So then we do need to mov AC DAT in order to save that, because if we're going to do a DGT we'll lose it again. Unless, of course, no, I think we do, because we have to get, because if we made that a DGT 0, that would obviously be stupid, because we've already got that, and if we made it a DGT 2, we still have to do it for yes. Right, so I think that should still work, and is now much shorter. I mean, obviously, we're only testing it on one case here, but gives the right answer. It's clearly correct. So that gives us quite a bit of space for somewhere down here. I don't know. Yeah, well, but the problem is that then we want to remember the last 2 time units, the numbers from the last 2 time units. and we haven't really got space in this processor to remember anything. So we're probably going to need another processor just to do some remembering for us. Because the question is, rather inconveniently, was the sum of the numbers for the last two time units, for this time unit and the previous one, no, it's not even that, is it? Greater than, I was going to say greater than 1, but actually it was the last time unit 1, and is this time unit at least 1? Or was the last time unit 0, and is this time unit at least 2? Something equally irritating to check, unless, yeah. The thing is, we can't just accumulate how many we've seen so far, because we have to remove things when they're 2 time units old. Yes. So I think the best approach here involves having, if I'm going to do it like this, and like I think this is probably a sensible arrangement, to essentially have one batch of processors that does the control stuff and another batch that do the shuffling data around, possibly instructed by the processors that do the control stuff. So let's trash the ones that don't seem to work very well. And add some more over here. So... no, we don't need to do that. Right. So... the general idea here, I think, is that this processor has one, essentially pushes things through the numbers it gets through ACK and DAT in successive time units, and then inspects ACK and DAT each time unit and works out what to do about them. So actually, largely because I think it will make things a bit clearer, let's do that. Right. These probably don't need to be SLXs, they can be SLUPs eventually. Not that makes very much difference, because it's still one instruction. So then we just do something like, if we have some non-existent instructions for testing things for the various outcomes. So if we had something last time and something this time, merge them, and then we'll send that. If we had otherwise, do I? I'm going for now to just do this because I send us back up. Do that as a jump so that I don't have to think, so that I can do else without it breaking my brain. Otherwise, if ACK is greater than 1, Now that doesn't quite work because, or rather, yes, that doesn't quite work because if we oh yeah, maybe I should do it like that. Because if we get a long succession of ones, i.e. a single signal each time unit, we need to make sure we send precisely alternating. So we shouldn't repeatedly go, oh, there was one last time unit and there's one this time unit, let's send both of them. We need to go send, don't send, send, don't send. But I think possibly the approach to that is whenever we send anything, we set ACK to 0 in this processor to say there are no pulses left to send. So, assuming that we can sensibly have a signal that says send what we got last time and a different signal that says send what we got this time, then that will work. Which would be lovely if it were true. So, so then the plan is that we want to do something like have a way of converting numbers to the numbers from this thing into that sequence of bytes for the output, and we probably want some kind of a merge sort. I wonder if what we end up with here is a pipeline of two processors that have last round's 2 bytes and this round's 2 bytes, and that can turn them into lists, and then a merge sort processor that merges the two of, or well, not really merge sort, a merge processor that merges two sorted lists together. I mean, actually it doesn't do the fully general thing because one of the lists is guaranteed to be of length either 0 or 1. And I think they're disjoint. They have been in all the samples so far. Well, we know that neurons have some time period after they fired during which they're suppressed in some way. So clearly they are. Something can't fire in two successive time units. It never happens in the one sample out of 80 that we've got in front of us. I mean, at the moment we have this entanglement, this setup of two processors and a RAM which can do this job. Now that feels like obvious overkill. And this one is clearly doing far more work than is necessary. But on the other hand, this one is needing quite a lot of effort to do the fairly easy part of the job. But I may have been forgetting about digit set. Maybe we can make it much faster. So which order do these numbers come out in? So we get 1, 1, 11 for sense 0 and sense 1, and 100 for sense 5. So they're in the kind of obvious order, as in the sense 0 is the low order digit. So, damn it, I had a thought and it's wandered off again. So that's inconvenient if you want to emit them in order by the idea that I had just had, which was you can do, is it greater than 99? If so, send the top digit and then digit set that to 0, and then is it greater than 9, next digit, then is it greater than 0? And you could just chop the digits off fairly efficiently by digit setting them. But annoyingly, it's actually the low order digit that we want to talk about first. And while obviously you can digit get the low order digit, that's relatively expensive. Because it trashes the contents of the accumulator, and you then have to reload the accumulator from somewhere in order to do the next bit, the next digit. So, and if this is constructing lists, then reversing them is going to be kind of awkward, because you'll end up wanting to reverse an unknown length list, because the lists will be different, because the length of the list will depend on how many things you've seen. So then we end up with the annoying thing of, like, read this thing in, copy it to dat, digit get one digit, copy it from dat, digit get the next digit, copy it from dat, digit get the last digit, and send them somewhere. So you end up with 3 instructions per digit, which is 9 instructions total, which is not quite enough to be catastrophic, but it does need both registers, which is annoying, because it makes it hard to have the two to use a small processor to do the job. I mean, I suppose you could avoid writing to DAT by getting something else to feed you things. You still have the annoyance of having to that digit get only reads from only read from the accumulator, so you can't make any use of the fact that most of the instructions could read from I/O ports. So you're always going to have 3 instructions here per digit. At best. And so if this is actually going to send increasing numbers, we then have to do a comparison as well, which is 4 instructions per digit. So we're at 12 instructions to process half of the input signals. So that's kind of inconvenient, and that's probably why I've got this fairly horrid design at the moment. Maybe, though, the answer involves more processors.
Try to cram more stuff onto your card.
Well, in particular, at the moment we have this thing where it stuffs a bunch of stuff into RAM and then something else reads the stuff from the RAM, and I find myself thinking maybe we can do better by actually not putting the RAM in between. And if we're not trying to be so clever, that might be good enough. So if we keep roughly that design, we have the slight problem that this one doesn't have anywhere to get its data from, because this one is doing all the work. But how about we but if things could get simpler, if this one doesn't have to muck around with RAM addressing, if we go to a more synchronous arrangement, we could have this processor. Let's wire that up to there temporarily so that we can connect that up again. That will now mean this one isn't getting anything, but we can pay attention to that later. So yes, the issue here is that, oh gods, do we need a big processor here as well? I mean, this one was originally just, yeah, let's make that a big one so that we can do more stuff in it. Yes. So now there's enough space for me to do some more interesting things here. So what I was thinking was, actually, let's not muck around with stashing things in DAT and having to remember counts and so forth. Let's just have this one send. Sorry, I'm just going. Is it even better if this one just? I think so. If this one were to do things the really overkill way, it could go mov x0 ac dgt 0 mov ac x3 for each of our 6 digits, except it can't, because that's 18 instructions and we can't fit 18 instructions in one processor. So instead it does mov x0 x3 mov 0 x3 oops. Then the same thing for x1, and for good measure, oh god, we haven't got enough space for the sleep now. Well, maybe this one will have to get its data from somewhere else. I don't know. So that would be the really crude approach, because that then means that this processor just repeatedly does mov x1 ac dgt x1 more somewhere else. Because it needs to be able to sleep, we'll have it SLXX1 at the top. Okay, that's really a very simple thing, and we might be able to move some of the work into this processor so as to give this one the extra one instruction it needs to be able to both send data to this one and to sleep. So all this is doing is then transmitting out of one of its XBus ports a 6-digit sequence of ones and zeros, with the idea that something else will then work out what that means. But in particular will not need to do any counting of how many bits were set itself, because these systems will handle that. So if we wanted to make that slightly more... So yes, the thing is that this is very simple precisely because it doesn't have that 3 times around loop that it would otherwise need. But maybe it can just do it as a... Since it only needs... Yeah, it can do what I was going to do down there, but it only needs to do it 3 times. So it could instead do... something like this. And we've still got enough space. And that then removes the need for this one to send the digit numbers each time. And then that one can also send the data to that one for timing purposes, for working out what to send purposes. So can we make this, since I don't think I'm going to want to put much more cleverness in this, I might be able to make this one even more efficient. Oh, that, yes, of course, that also needs a slip one at the end just to make sure it won't fit. Actually, isn't that 9 instructions, which is just the number we can fit in there? Surely not, that looks too much. Yeah, no, that'll fit. So now this one emits the sequence of ones and zeros that something else is going to have to turn into actual sensor numbers. You can probably send it out from a more sensible pin than X0, like X3. So then, if this one's only going to have 2 XBus pins connected, oh no, we can't do that because that P pin is in the way. How annoying. I thought I would be able to... oh yes, I can. Right. So then, I mean, so let's do the really crude one first. If x1 is greater than 0, then morph at x3 add 1 if at is greater than 6, reset it to 0. Sleep 1, reset it to 0, go around again. So that does everything, that does the easy bit, in that just, if everything works. Okay, that's odd. Why did that transmit 1 byte too many? I think. Oh no, it didn't transmit. What? Okay, we'll step through it. That gets a 1, 1, which it extracts a 1 from, which it sends. Which causes that to send 0. Oh, maybe I'm confused. It extracts another 1, which causes that to send 1. It extracts a 0, which causes that to send nothing. Another 0, send nothing. A 100, which means send 1, means send 5. Okay, it sent a spurious 6 at the end. So that actual NA, oh, is that because we haven't yet reached the end of the time step? Right, yes. And indeed. Something is spinning without sleeping, but not telling me about it. Oh, right, yes. So, am I screwing this up in some amusing way? Oh yes, that's the amusing way in which I'm screwing it up, right. So that sends the right thing, because it's doing the... Okay, I'm still screwing it up in an amusing way somewhere. Oh yes, that one isn't ever sleeping. Yes, it is sleeping. It sleeps there. Okay, what's going on? Something in this game that counts from 0 and not 1. Right. Right, so again it's screwing up on the interesting cases, but we have an interesting case detection processor now. So one of the things is we need to make sure that in a cycle where we receive only one signal, we know what it was on the next cycle. So that's fairly easy to do. Whenever we think about sending something, we mov act dat as well. So there's some entertaining possibilities for deadlocks here, aren't there? I think we want to make sure that the control processors see the data before the data processors see the data. So then this one will work out the count on the first, fairly early in the cycle. and this one will then know what to do with it. So then this one should have actually two or three modes. One mode is where it just listens for one number and remembers it. So I think I want to add that as a case down here. One is where it listens for some numbers and merges them with the number that it has stashed. It doesn't listen for some numbers, it counts some things and waits and then merges with the one it has stashed. And that may be it, actually. I suppose the other one is where it sends things out and doesn't merge with what it has stashed. Yes. So and those are all only like what the first one of those is a single mov instruction. So that may not be too bad. So the major problem here is I'm again want the indirect jump instruction from the TIS 100. So we want to. So this one at the moment does that, which is if last round we had one and this round we have at least one, then send both of them. If last round we have one, if this round we have at least two, send this round's ones. So there should probably also be, if last round was 1 and this round is 0, then if this round is 1 and last round was 0, then remember this round. Which I will do as crudely as I did last time and see if it works. So if last round was 0 and this round is 1, so then we have a slight problem that we haven't got enough instructions to do all the jumps right. But the thing is that actually it may be that we can do something more sensible, because it will turn out that some of this is like unnecessary. So what does this one, so under one circumstance we want this to just mov ac dat. So we essentially have this listening on x2, say, and it wants to do something like does this work? If x2 is 1, no, that doesn't work. So the thing is that this is going to be in a loop that reads over that reads all of those numbers, and ideally on each cycle of that loop it wants to ask this one what's going on, which is slightly inconvenient because this one isn't going to be able to tell it every cycle. But if necessary, we can have an auxiliary processor whose job it is to provide suitable control signals to this one. So the thing is that, yes, we don't want that mov ac x3 and mov ac dat. Under some circumstances we want one, and under some circumstances we want the other, and under some circumstances we want neither. No, I don't think that's the case. So let's imagine if we have something that tells us what to do. On x2, we're going to do something like we have that test. So then we want to. Problem is, if we just. Now that might work. Hang on. So then, if we always save in dat, because we can always wipe it later, then we can go. If x2 is non-zero, i.e. if we get a signal from some control processor that we are meant to be transmitting, then mov that to x3. But that's awkward because we actually want what we actually want is to say, if we have, assuming we can arrange that dat gets wiped if we're not going to need it this round, then by wiped I think I mean set to -1, or set to something outside the range 0 to 5, which inconveniently is not its default on startup. Yeah. Yes, well, the problem is I think I'm going to have to reverse the polarity of a pile of tests, and that's always a tricky thing to do usually because of the lack of a TNE, though actually I'm not doing anything here that needs that, so maybe I don't know how to reverse the polarity. So then the circumstances under which we transmit are, first, are we transmitting at all this time unit? And then second, if we are transmitting, is either our input signal non-zero or dat equal to ac. We expect those last two to be mutually exclusive. It is obviously important that we read x1 even if we aren't going to transmit, but that's fine because the other thing we do is we use it to determine whether to save what we're doing into dat. So what we could do here is, if we do assume those two are mutually exclusive, then we can separately go, oh no, oh gods, no, Ben, that's not going to work. Yes, sorry, I've slowed down. Possibly not for the reasons you're thinking. Right. So, I mean, I think the design here is still reasonable, but it may require. I mean, I'm wondering if actually we turn it inside out. Like, if we made each case a different So what I'm just worrying about is that we do actually have to be careful about overwriting dat at the wrong moment. But what I was thus wondering is if we did something that went... So if we just write out the three cases and then worry about how we choose between them in a bit. One of the cases is we're just transmitting this one. So we go... Which is actually what we had before, so let's just undo until we get back to the version we had before, which is that version. Noting that that bit, that loop termination can possibly be no, because we have to do the same loop each time. But maybe we could of course do the branch each loop. So let's go for that thing for now. So that's version, what we will call version A. Version B is that. Version C is the complicated one because it's that. So the loop, the core of the loop is either see if our input is non-zero. If it is, send the current counter, or see if our input is non-zero. If it is, stash this datum for the next round, or see if our input is non-zero, or the datum from the next round is equal to the current counter, and in either case send the current counter. So the slight problem is that those three between them plus any necessary jumps are liable to end up being more than this processor can hold. But we can probably fix that eventually. So we want to we can probably merge the tails of two of these. But whether we want to or not is another matter. So that mov could be replaced with a jump to there, for instance. But so we will need... That one will then need a jump to there. Except, of course, that mov can turn out... Now that's fine, because the mov, that becomes an unconditional jump, doesn't it? on, we can do better than that, surely. Because those two tests don't care what order they happen in. And we think... No, hang on, that doesn't work, yes. So... that doesn't quite work. I was hoping that then I could replace A with just a loop, with just a label here, so you jump into the middle of that conditional. But that, of course, does require that the condition codes be minus at this point, which may require it probably requires one instruction of setup, which takes so long that you may as well have done something else. That you may as well just have an unconditional version of the same instruction somewhere else. Anyway. So that's all very well, but now we need to sort out that three-way branch in slightly too few instructions. Because we need to jump to A, B or C depending on an input, and we only have two instructions to do that in. Obviously jumping to A is trivial, you just fall through to it. But since each jump takes an instruction and a compare takes an instruction, we need at least 3 instructions to do that. So this will only work if we can boil out that instruction there. No, sorry. That instruction there. Which we presumably can, because we could use a TCP and make sure that the negative branch takes us to here. So we do something like that. Hang on, I've got a spare instruction now, haven't I? Yes. So then, if it receives a negative input, it jumps to A, which does compare against, which does test the input and transmit if it's positive. That's this. If the input is positive, it goes to C, which is check against that and then check against this. And if it's 0, that means save the current value. So then all we would need is to make sure that this one receives 6 copies of the correct instruction for the current cycle, current time unit in each time unit. And our problem here is that now we need to boil this lot down to the point where we can actually have it send. We obviously can't have this one send all 6 instructions, so we're going to need a particularly silly little processor here that does something like that. So that handles multiplying up anything it gets from this one into enough into one thing per cycle on this one. So then the tricky thing is that this processor currently has far too much code in it. So can we make it simpler? So one thing is we can have this receive the current count repeatedly if it's useful. We've got several spare instructions that could just become mov ac x3 repeatedly here. This might be helpful. So what's this currently doing? It does wait for x1, which should only happen once per time unit. So that will be equivalent to a slip 1. It then remembers that in AC. That may be unnecessary. It then checks DAT and AC. So there's some. So we could, for instance, do. I'm going to wipe this out and then rewrite it because I think we need to be applying extra brain now. So, in particular, knowing that we can get more copies of the data if we need them. So then we could, for instance, go add DAT TGT 1, i.e. do we need to transmit anything this cycle, this time unit, TGT AC 1. If we don't, jump to somewhere else, then if one of the things we need to merge in is DAT, then we need to send both, which is positive to x3. Otherwise, send negative to x3. In either case, mov naught AC. Z is in the case where we aren't transmitting anything this cycle. So our only question is the old AC equal to 1? So this is our tricky bit, because now we probably want to get another thing from here, but we're only doing it under certain conditions. So then we say if AC is 1, then signal please save it. So we only get there if we aren't actually sending anything this cycle. So then we just have the slight problem that on this path we don't read that, but then we can just do mov x1 null in order to throw that signal away. Right. Well, that crashed fairly early. You going to tell me who's crashed? Everyone's crashed. Right, well, let's step through it and watch what happens then.
The one of them crashed, and then the other one ran into it and couldn't go through a portal. The third one shunted in front.
Yeah. So let's. It was. Hang on. Let me just rerun it so I can remember which ones wedged, though they may not be the ones at fault, of course. So it's this set up here that have got jammed up. It looks like. No, that one's blocking on reading from X1, which indicates. Oh, but we've reached the end. We've successfully transmitted the first packet. Sorry. Yes. In that case, I'm going to step through this just to show is it working. So that's got the correct sum of the digits. This one is currently waiting for the control section to conclude that that sum of digits means it should be transmitting. So that this now sends -1, which means just send the current cycle's digits. Which goes up there. And we indeed send the current cycle's digits. So at this point, everyone has slept. This one's about to send things to here, which looks good. This one is waiting for its input from here, which is fine. This one is about to start waiting for its input from here to tell it what to do next. And this one's waiting for this one. And this one is waiting for this one. So that all looks like we've ended up in the right place. So now we should just get zeros everywhere. Have I actually coded that case? I may have completely forgotten the nothing interesting is happening case. So what happens then? So that produces 0, as is correct. And yes, to the extent I have thought about it, I've carefully made sure we don't accidentally do the wrong thing. Sadly, that doesn't mean we do the right thing. But, can we sensibly take advantage of that? Because the thing is, actually, if we save the wrong value, that's perfectly fine. Or if we save nothing at all, that's perfectly fine. Because this one doesn't worry about whether it's got something saved. It expects the control system to tell it whether what it's got saved is valuable. So it's fine for it to save things, whatever it's doing, as long as doing so doesn't corrupt something it's going to need later. But if nothing's happening this round, there's nothing to corrupt. So actually we can simplify this. That doesn't need to read from X1, which means that doesn't need to read from X1. This doesn't need to write to it. Why doesn't triple click select line? That doesn't need to read from X1. It just sends, unconditionally sends save. Well, that got further. We've now found... Hey, the hard case turned out to be doing nothing. Yes, now we have the interesting case, and that one has wedged writing. Interesting. Right, so let's watch what happened there. We'll stick a breakpoint at the start of that cycle. So the bit count, the set bit counter correctly says 1 set bit. That correctly jumps to Z, which is the save case, and sends the save signal. That sends the save signal. That one then loops through, and that ends up being 0 because bit 0 is the one that's currently set. Everyone sleeps. Next round. The bit counter should now count 3. Yes. So we should now be in the both case, which is send +1. Excellent. That correctly sends +1. So this processor has done the right thing. Realised I frequently say that and expect you to be able to see which processor on the screen I'm looking at. Yes. So what's this? Is this one going to do the right thing then? It jumps to C. It says, is ACK DAT? To which the answer should be yes. Oh, right, yes, I see the problem. Our problem is that because of the order those tests happen in, we never bother reading X1. And so that 0 there gets stuck unread and everything ends offset by 1 in the packet. Right. Possibly my optimizations were a little too... yeah, a little too aggressive. Because even in that case, it needs to make sure that X1 gets read. Happily, we've got a spare instruction, so let's put that leftover mob X1 null that we had spare from this processor in up there instead. What? That's now wedged one instruction earlier, one cycle earlier. Oh, bloody breakpoints. Maybe I should remove the breakpoint. Well, that's getting closer. We're about as good as the last version ever managed to reach. So it was there where it was meant to send 4.5 and sent 3.45. I think that 3 has ended up being picked up somehow. So, I mean, we don't really need to step very carefully through this cycle. Yeah, so this should end up with DAT set to 3, as indeed it does, and we don't transmit any packets. So that works entirely correctly. I think I know where my problem lies. Because I end up going to save, but I don't at any point but DAT is still 1, DAT being the but ACK is still 1, whereas in the save why why is AC1 at that point? Because by now, I'm going to have to so let's move that breakpoint and rerun this again. Put the breakpoint in the cycle that goes wrong rather than the cycle before it. So at this point, the bit counter should return 0. It does. Right, so then the problem is that I do indeed need a test down here to say, because AC here is actually the sum of the last 2 cycles, and we mov that to dat, whereas we need it to be just the current cycle. But that may be easily enough done by not doing mov acdat, but instead at the 2 points where we need it. I mean, we could probably do this more elegantly, making it mov x1 dat, because we do actually have a copy of last time's number here. Ugly, but it might work. That's the breakpoint. That looks better. Quite slow to simulate, but victory. Quite slow to simulate, it's expensive, it's power hungry, it has far too much code in it, and I thought this was the efficient version. So yes, I think the critical insight here was separate the control and the data flow. Which is like the kind of thing you do if you're actually building processors and such like. Is, I mean, doing the processor type design. You have a control handling bit, and you have the actual data flow, and the control handling bit pokes things into the data flow bits in order to get things to happen at the right moments. And so I think I had previously been approaching it too much as a programmer, in that I had been assuming that having nice self-describing data structures you passed around was the best thing to do. So, like, I was, like, say, my assumption was, well, we'll just pass a delimited array here, and then we'll merge these 2 arrays and store things in RAM. And actually, the right thing was to have one subsystem whose job was to work out what needed to happen, and to have it instruct the other subsystem to actually do the work. Right.
As the other kind of programmer, in that my multiply by 111 suggestion was based on exactly the kind of bit trilling trick that I would have done if all of those processes had been like sensible 32-bit binary things.
Yes, which also doesn't work. So yes, and we have slightly silly things of 2 processors whose main job is to repeatedly send the same data in different directions.
Presumably has a lot to do with why there's a shitload of code in this book.
Yes. I mean, to be fair, you could possibly have turned this one into some loops, but it fitted. So yes, I don't think I'm going to attempt anything else tonight. I think that's quite enough of that. But like, it worked, hooray, and like, it's not horribly ugly. It has a design you can explain, even. In that, I think, in that this is these 2 are just moving data around and do basically no cleverness at all. This one splits up the 3-digit numbers you get from these into their individual digits. This one counts the number of set bits in each time cycle. This one works out what to do about each time, is the actual control, the brains of the operation, and decides what to do in each time cycle. And this one follows the instructions of this one and actually does it and marshals the outgoing packets. And that is that. So yes, hurrah for that. I'm quite pleased with that. Does this get you what you need? For now, yes. I have an email offering to turbocharge my brain from Brain Pills Info. Do you want to increase your mental abilities by up to 400%? Activate the previously unknown genius centre of your brain. Never be confused again. Find out more.
Oblong appeals.
The World Institute for the Brain. Brains. So yes, that's sorted. And next time, let's have a quick peer at this. We have a thing for neural processing lattice complete with proper diagram. Excellent. We receive some kind of a packet and then drive motors in various directions in order to activate the alpha, beta and psi valves to extrude different scaffold materials. And we essentially can drive things in different directions, and
This is actually a bit suspiciously similar to your printer.
yes, we will see. Maybe once I've done, maybe this will be a sensible introduction to it so that I can sort out the other one. Anyway, that I'm not doing today. So that will be all for tonight. We might see you on Friday, depending on how late everything ends up happening, given last week. But probably we'll see you on Friday. So good night, everyone. Oh no, I don't want that one.